3, 2, 1. Oh, it's Sunday again.
Yes.
We get to talk about weird things that have nothing to do with real estate.
Boy, there are a lot of weird things these days. It's hard to keep up.
I know. It's like in the news this morning. What was it? Or you just scanning the headlines. Julie and I subscribe to Google Alerts. You guys should do it too. It keeps you off the incessant, never-ending black hole of normal news sites, right? You go to Fox or whatever, and you scroll down, a couple, just maybe once or twice, and all of a sudden you're awash in all these horrible ads and just,
Yuck.
Garbage. So Google Alerts is the way to go, and just use your keywords, whatever is relevant to what you're interested in.
Be more selective that way with your news.
Right. I mean, Julie told me yesterday, Tim, do you know about all the riots that are happening all over the country? And I'm like, no, what riots? Because I wasn't even looking, And then here it is. We did have our Google Alert set up for the whole thing that's happening right now at the International Space Station.
Which was a better distraction, to be quite honest.
But how can you have those at time in our lives? 2020, this is the craziest year ever, seriously.
Craziest.
I mean,
it's like a century worth of stuff all at once. I mean, you got your aliens. We've been reporting on that. You got your cicadas, i.e. kind of related to locusts, is what reminds me of. Because, of course, what else do we have? Murdering hornets. And then, not to mention the pandemic. So I don't know if there's some kind of contest going on out there for the weirdest thing to
Well, no,
create,
you're forgetting a whole bunch, too.
And the riots. And
you're forgetting the best one.
Yeah.
The Navy and the government actually confirming
I said aliens,
that there's... Oh, you say aliens?
Yeah.
That there's actually UFOs that have been visiting us for some time.
Yeah.
And that they have it caught on film, and that we had that as
I think that if they released that little bit of intel during a global pandemic and economic crisis and riots, that maybe it'll just be smoothed over, whereas in normal times it would be a thing.
Exactly. Maybe let's just go ahead and get that out there so we could say we did it.
Like now that they've accepted all this other crap, let's just layer this one on.
It'll get pushed out on the.
It'll blend.
It will blend. It won't be pandemics, aliens visiting. Of course, that's normal.
Of course. What the hell?
I mean, how cool is it that? You've been following SpaceX. Because you are a true nerd.
I am.
Yeah.
But it is incredible.
Talk about it.
I mean, I absolutely don't even pretend to understand any of the math, the engineering, the logistics. But, I mean, you can take any aspect of that historic flight and say, seriously, we can do that?
Yeah.
Like, how about, I was talking to your mom this morning about, the trouble that we occasionally have with our internet and not being able to communicate with each other. And here, these guys are 260 miles above the Earth, and all their communication works. So how is it? Okay, how much does that cost to install in your house, right? So to keep that in perspective, I looked it up just so that there's some way to compare these things. On average, when you're cruising at 35,000 miles up in the air, cruising altitude in a good-sized jet, you're about 6 to 6.5 miles above the Earth. The deepest in the ocean you can get is about the same, about 6 miles down. They're 260 miles up there.
Wow.
I mean, hopefully that gives some perspective to it. And, the International Space Station is flying at 17,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And they can dock. Like, most people can barely put their car in a parking place.
I can't pull backwards anymore without a camera. I'll admit it.
Right? I mean, these guys are studs.
If I don't have sonars and cameras and all these things, I used to be able to reverse, but I can't anymore.
I know.
I've gotten dumb.
Well, I
Happens.
don't know. I mean, and then I was wondering how many kids are being born today might be named Bob and Doug, boy twins. There's going to be a whole bunch of Bob and Doug twins. You just watch.
Because those are the astronaut names. People are listening and going, Julie, what the hell are you talking about?
But you're right. Those are good astronaut names.
Yeah,
you want
totally.
Like when you get on a plane, I always listen for the pilot's name. You don't want it to be like, Bobo or something.
Or some sort of like,
weird
you want an absolute nerd name,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, you want to have confidence in your pilot's name.
Yeah, so a parent, then these astronauts are probably about our age, I'm guessing. Yeah. So if you have a parent where their kid was born in the 70s and they named their kid Trevor, or they gave him some sort of moon unit hippie name,
Yeah.
There's no way that kid's going to become an astronaut.
No, it just can't happen.
Right. You have a baby and you name that thing Bob. What the hell else is going to do?
It's a good chance.
That's not.
I know.
Bob or Doug.
Yeah.
I mean, good names.
They are.
Good, strong, traditional names.
Absolutely. Nothing weirdo about that.
But not real creative names.
No, just nice and solid. I like it.
Julie's name was going to be, her mom told us, they actually were going to name Julie
Gigi,
Gigi?
because it's French, goes with my maiden name, but
Yeah.
glad we dodged that bullet.
Well, Gigi Guthrie would have been
It
cool.
would have been okay.
Yeah.
I could have lived with that.
So now we're going to meander back, but
But as far as the space flight thing, I mean, just incredible. The thing that I liked about it, all sorts of things which were incredible. First of all, that, private industry funded by the government as well. This was a good partnership. And to be able to prove that you can do a flight like that into space, and it really was seamless. Like every benchmark that was supposed to happen happened exactly as planned. The astronauts even said on their docking, they said, this is basically what the simulation was like. And the guy that wrote the simulation was listening. He's like, thank God they said that. That's what you want to hear
Did
as
he
the
actually
engineer.
say that?
Yeah, he's like, that's awesome news.
I wonder where he figured out how to make the software to know what it's like to,
I know, right? It's all engineering and math, I guess. But
Yeah.
that was incredible. But the cool thing that NASA did was that they broadcast this live on Facebook from beginning to end, and they had all of the comments from all over the world on the side. And it was definitely people celebrating something very positive with the backdrop of all this other crazy stuff. So I think that was a really good uniting that happened.
It's unfortunate that that's the first time there's been a U.S. launch of a, interstellar vehicle, or at least
Since 2011.
Since the last space shuttle.
Yeah.
And
in fact, one of the astronauts was on the last flight of the last shuttle. So that's sort of cool.
Yeah. And in case you guys have been wondering, because I didn't know this either until Nerdball over here told me. By the way, if you do hear parrots and wind and whatnot, it's because, yes, we are outside, so that is the way it goes. But how many people were on the space station when they got there?
I'm not sure exactly how many. I know there were a couple of Russians and at least one American.
Okay.
But it's been up there for 20 years.
And we've been basically riding up to the space station in Russian rockets.
On the Soyuz, yes.
On the Soyuz.
At a very high cost. And in fact, SpaceX delivered it in less investment per seat than what we've been paying on the Soyuz. So that's significant too.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So they're able to do it cheaper.
And I got a real kick out of looking at the astronauts in their spacesuits, because I remember it was either listening on a Joe Rogan podcast or something else where Elon was talking about the fact that he had a hand in on redesigning the spacesuits.
Yeah.
And it did totally look like something that somebody who had a hand in on designing a Tesla would have designed.
Oh yeah, even their seats and the capsule itself, it totally looked like they could have been sitting in a Tesla design.
Isn't that cool, though?
It is cool.
Holy crap.
I mean, Elon has his moments of wondering where he's going with something, what he's thinking, but he's clearly a brilliant mind. He's going to go down, I think, in history as our modern Einstein, or whatever comparison you want to make. He's clearly a really smart dude.
Einstein was more about theoretical physics and ideas and coming up with concepts.
Elon's more about implementation, I think.
Elon's getting shit done.
Yeah. I mean, think about what he manages, what he's created just in his lifetime.
Yeah, I know.
And he's still 50-ish, maybe less?
I think he's
somewhere like
late
that.
40s.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, he's got a long runway to keep on. Maybe he will actually get to Mars.
Actually,
my favorite quote from Elon was, "I want to die on Mars, just not on impact." Isn't that funny? But he's a dude that you could see actually accomplishing that dream,
It's interesting that so
Amazing.
many people have a conflict with the idea that why would you want to have any sort of focus on, humans on Mars when it's so foreign to our bodies. And it really is. I mean, there's nothing there that's going to be very friendly.
No, for sure.
The sojourn there itself is supposed to be,
sucky.
kind of sucky because it's so far and there's so many different
Radiation.
And I think the answer is because that's why.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like anything else too. What are the things that will come as the milestones to get there? This was one of them.
Right. That's actually an interesting. I wrote down some ideas for us to talk about today, but that's an interesting way for us to kind of pivot here, because the reality of it is that if you try to put practical thinking and try to drill down, which is what we primarily do for our coaching business, but if you try to put thinking like that, it keeps you relatively short term and, like I said, practical,
sure.
which is how you have to be. But if you really want to think big and if you really want to take yourself to the next level, you have to almost you have to shed so much of your innate desire to try to have things make logical sense
right, in a logical order.
Based on your current way of thinking. You have to be able to say, like, so when I come up with an idea, for example, my brain immediately goes to existing software, algorithms for trying to solve a problem, right, in my head. But in order to, if you come up with a really, really big challenge, for example, going to Mars, pretty much all your existing software, you're going to immediately sense and feel that it's really obsolete.
Right.
It's starting with your
but
thinking,
that
right?
causes you to make changes.
Well, to your
and
point,
to upgrade.
To your point, though, like, why would you want to go to Mars? And I think the answer is, honestly, it's because, but then you said something that really makes sense. It's because what happens as a result? What are the unintended consequences? So you have to be thinking large enough to realize that just because there is no obvious answers to that question that you just said, based on your current software, that you will discover the answers along the path to actually accomplishing the goal.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I can't remember where I read it, but one of the time management goal setting, I don't know, one of those books was talking about how, you don't have to know all of the steps. You probably won't. And in fact, you're kind of arrogant to think that you should know all of the steps to say, get to Mars. But all you have to know is the first one or two steps. And the steps between there and the final steps are all going to change in between anyway.
Right.
So you have to take action somehow. I mean, I see it with our real estate agents, what an odd comparison we're doing here, but it's okay. It's all related to taking action. The agents who decide that, okay, this is the year I'm going to be a listing agent. What are, maybe I've got a list of what I think it's going to take, but I don't know all of the steps. I do know, let's say I need to have a pre-listing package. Let's start with that. And then that leads to being able to handle objections better. And that leads to more confidence. And then one step follows the next. And I think anything in life is really like that. I mean, I could relate it to when Zoe was a baby. I didn't know what the hell was going on.
You didn't even know what I wanted to talk. Yeah, right. I know. That was scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's not think about that.
Too many flashbacks. But anyway, back to our point.
You and I will never emotionally comprehend how we, All right, so I have something interesting to talk about.
Okay.
And it's perfect with what we were just talking about.
Good.
So you and I are totally vibing. 6 months left this year, effectively. Really 7. Yeah. But say June through, obviously, December, 6 months left. The first half of the year has been...
Well, I think January and February were kind of okay. But then, got a little bit off the rails.
Yeah, and, it's probably... The pattern of off the rails is probably going to continue.
Probably. Seems to be.
Right. And so one of the things that I was just asking myself personally, I mean, this Sunday show is... you and Julie and I are going to just be Julie and I. I was asking myself this morning, and really maybe for the past 2 weeks, whether or not you and I are thinking big enough. And we think pretty big. I mean, as we are recording this podcast, Julie and I are sitting in our, beach close villa at the Ritz-Carlton in Dorado, Puerto Rico. And, there's so many other things that have happened in our lives. But last year this time, literally, it was May, wasn't it? Or was it April?
It was about May.
Yeah. Julie and I had seriously, considered and hadn't made the decision yet to actually move here. There are a whole host of reasons why we moved to Dorado. The one that was the most pressing was Julie's health. We were living in north of Austin, Texas, and Julie had basically developed asthma. She was on 3 different kinds of inhalers. There was no time of year when she wasn't basically a shit
asthmatic
show.
Mess.
An asthmatic mess.
Some of my coaching clients will attest to that because I had some cough going on in those calls, and
our podcast too.
And on the podcast, yeah. I mean, and the 3 inhalers. I finally caved and went to an allergist because I hadn't had allergies.
Well, that's where you got the inhalers from.
Yeah, and they're like, yeah, you might want to think about moving because the only county in the entire U.S. that has worse pollen, if you're allergic to pollen, as I am, is a county outside of Atlanta. But other than that, like our actual zip code was the worst.
Yeah, where
I remember seeing the pollen puffing through the air.
Big yellow clouds that were almost like opaque. It was intense.
It's gross.
But she had developed a really bad pulmonary issue, obviously. And I don't know if you thought about this, Julie, but the coronavirus, people say basically lose half their lung capacity. When she originally went and had that checked, or, essentially when the pollen was really bad, she had 50% lung capacity.
Yeah.
And she was still going to Orange Theory,
Yeah.
and you were still running. You were still doing your 3 miles a day.
Yeah.
So moral of the
I
story.
do feel a lot better here.
Of course.
There are days when we get that weird Saharan dust, considering
I know.
that we're directly west of Africa.
Yeah.
But
isn't that
other
crazy?
than that, it's pretty good.
It is batshit crazy to think a couple nerds from Columbus, Ohio that,
know.
are now living in the Caribbean.
Weirdos.
Isn't that weird?
It is.
It is. Anyway, so the doctor said, essentially, you guys, and this was a doctor who I would assume wanted to keep Julie's business because Julie would have
Well,
been a
I
client.
was going on 2 to 3 times a week for allergy shots. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
She
we were
said
good business.
she told Julie that we should move. That's what she said. And there were the parameters for where we could move based on Julie having a noticeable improvement in her health. Where we could move was in the United States. Julie just told you Atlanta, and the only other place was here in Puerto Rico.
No, Atlanta was bad. It was the only
It was the worst place.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she said something coastal so that you have
Wind, breeze.
wind and enough rain to wipe the pollen out. And, she gave me a good list. But, and I really liked Georgetown, Texas. There wasn't anything against that. It's just that this was a catalyst. And, I'm glad we did.
Yeah, so we moved down here, and you're not on anything now, are you?
Very little. Occasional Zyrtec, but
It's amazing.
yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, Zoe, I think, had a touch of that, too, and she's been better.
Well, so there's other advantages to moving down to Dorado too. We've done a few podcasts specifically on this topic, but the other one is a huge tax incentive. Now you have to meet certain criteria and all the rest of it, but there's a huge tax reason to move here too. If you guys want to learn more about that, just Google Puerto Rico Act 20 and Act 22. You might want to Google also Puerto Rico Act 60. But then there's, honestly, we are ready for a new adventure because we'd realized that in Texas, we had basically, we were starting to round the bend. We were getting complacent.
Yeah, ran its course.
We were.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
that was...
and, I have to say, our neighbors here are pretty amazing, too.
Yep.
It's really nice to be amongst tons of entrepreneurs and business people, both men and women. And just some of the conversations I've had at Zoe's school, and it's a really great environment.
It is
We made a good choice.
It's shockingly amazing, actually.
It is. Now, it comes with earthquakes and hurricanes and
Yep.
other strange things we haven't dealt with before, and generators and solar
Yep.
water, So, but that's all part of being flexible.
Well, but here's, getting
Yeah.
us right back on track, though, when you consider the fact that you and I are not, we're not afraid of thinking big.
Right.
Right? I mean, when we got married, and we've been married 29 years this year, right? 29?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, that wasn't
check.
that wasn't
Yes.
each other. We both on our 6th marriage. No, that's a
No.
joke. I like to say that when we go out with people, and I say that, and Julie gets
That's
mad
total
at me.
years, not no. Yeah.
That's totally yours.
No.
That's accumulation of all the marriage. No.
Just
All right, so
kidding.
it's 29 years. And sometimes when we tell people we met each other in high school, we said, that's back when, this is my other bad joke, that's back when marrying your first cousin was legal.
Very bad.
The funny thing, too, is, Julie, when I say that to some people...
People totally believe you.
They do.
I know. I'm going to cut that out.
No,
I
but
know.
they do. How dumb
Maybe it's
are they?
because they're married to their first cousin. I don't know.
No, it's
No.
because, the real
Because
reason...
you're believable.
Well, probably, but the real reason is because we're from Ohio, and they don't...
Right. It's just close enough to
Kentucky,
say, and West
West
Virginia.
Virginia, right.
All those places with that reputation.
I know, so they're like,
I think
huh.
the Ozarks has kind of moved up in that sort of decision tree, but after that show.
Well, coastal
Anyway.
people, which a lot of
Yeah.
our friends here are definitely from California and
Yeah.
New York, very, and they definitely have only flown over Ohio.
Oh, yeah, they totally believe it.
So they have, it is shocking how ignorant a lot of these people are, frankly, to being from the Midwest and what Midwestern
I
people
know.
are like. They really don't get it.
No.
They have such biases and they don't even know it.
Lack of exposure. I mean, people in Ohio, for example, have lack of exposure to the coastal towns
Definitely.
just as much. But there's also the reverse of that, where, when we lived in Nevada and we had our place in Laguna in California, we had plenty of friends that had never really gotten further out than, say, Vegas.
Yeah.
Because it's beautiful in California. You can't
Right.
really blame them, but they do lack that exposure.
But California people, now we lived in, part-time in Laguna Beach where
Yeah.
the average sale price was, I don't even know how much, not small.
Plenty.
And so we were surrounded by people who would vacation in Bahrain and,
Right.
just
Yeah.
crazy places.
That's true.
But this actually is perfectly in alignment with what, again, what I wanted to talk about, which was thinking big and setting goals. I know that's one of those topics that everyone talks about, but...
This is a great time to do that, though, to revamp it. We are into a different stage of the whole pandemic business and opening up and dealing with all sorts of things. And I think that we've been in this if this were Stranger Things, we'd call it the upside down.
No doubt.
But we've been in this strange zone, the hard reset. Some people are calling it the great pause, economically and what have you. But we've been at it long enough that I think it's time to reset. It's been happening enough that people have accepted that this is going to be weird, and we have to get on with it. It's not going to just change in a week and everything will be cool. I think the riots are a symptom not just of what happened with George Floyd, which was horrible. I think it was a catalyst that people have kind of snapped on some of the things that have wigged them out this year.
Which, by the way, you and I did predict, right?
Civil unrest. There you go.
We told you guys
we didn't
2 months
predict
ago.
the particular cause.
No.
But, that's what kicked it off. And we're probably going to see, unfortunately, more of that. And I think now's the time to reset your own personal goals, control your own 3-foot world, and get back to what you can control in 2020 and get serious about that, because we got 6 months left.
Well, so as far as if you want to try to figure out what's going to happen next for the rest of the year, probably more of what's happening now. And I don't want to talk about anything that's related to I want people to, and I want to think bigger too.
Yeah.
It's so easy when you start thinking about the riots and the lockdown that happened in Washington D.C. around the White House, and
it's easy to want to just stay home the
unemployment
rest of the year.
rate is so high, and so even just saying those things, I feel like a little wind's coming out of my sails. So I choose not to talk about that or think about that. But here's what I want to think about, and here's what I'm hoping you guys can benefit from: Julie, are we thinking big enough right now? And I'll give you the answer. It's absolutely not. You know why?
Why?
Because you can always think bigger.
Sure, you can always think bigger.
Elon, cranked out his cars and revolutionized the auto industry and whatnot. And he said, "Not good enough."
Nope, I want to go to Mars.
Right. So we need to think about going to Mars.
Yeah.
In our own way, we need to think about whether or not we're thinking big enough. And so it's 6 months. There's 6 months left this year, and I've been thinking a lot about the whole goal setting thing. And there's a bit of a tug of war with setting goals, because most people never accomplish the goals that they set for themselves, and we know why, because we've talked about this infinitesimally in our podcasts and our books and our coaching calls, right? Real estate treasure map. But the real reason that people don't accomplish goals, ultimately, it's not a belief thing or a mindset thing, is there's no action plan behind the goal. A goal is I know we're going to get into coaching mode. Let's not allow ourselves to do it. But a goal is a dream with an action plan at the end of the day. If you don't have an action plan following your goal, you're not going to accomplish it. And I think the other reason is that people set goals. I wonder if you agree with this. People set goals that are too easy to accomplish, that don't result in other new thought patterns and software being forcibly loaded. So, for example, you made the great example about going to Mars, right? And you said there doesn't have to be a clear reason why. Along the way, you'll figure out the wheres and whys and discover new things. It's that lack of a desire for discovery that keeps it so that people basically think too small and live a percent of what they otherwise could do. Does that make sense?
I think that's right. And, I think there's our parrots.
Yeah.
I think that on some level, people set goals, if they're goal setters at all, and I think that there's a certain percent that are afraid to set any goals, but most people set them a little bit short because they're afraid to fail. They're afraid to do the things it takes to maybe jump ahead a couple of steps. The other thing because we kind of bookend this with the rocket, the Dragon launch. One of the other things that Elon does is he sets radically shorter time frames than what you would think could be accomplished. From Tesla to the Dragon launch to Mars, he says things like 2 years or less. And, usually he's off by a year or so, but so what? He still probably shaved off 20 years of what normal people would think.
I'll give you an example. I know you haven't listened to this.
Yeah.
I don't even think, maybe you read about it. So Joe Rogan, I've listened to him. He's been on Joe's show twice. Yeah. And the first time he was hinting at some new technology, some brain communication interface. Have you read about this?
I just heard I remember the podcast you're referring to.
So Elon, right now, essentially, all the while going to Mars and creating rocket ships, and he also owns Solar City and God knows what else.
Right.
He decided that, he created this technology that melds, I know the conspiracy theorists are going crazy with this, but essentially makes us into cyborgs.
You mean the AI?
No, not AI. It's essentially a.
What do you mean by cyborg?
Okay, right. So paralyzed people, people that have neurological issues, from maybe all kinds of different things. He has figured out a technology that can make it so that there is a way to bypass whatever in the human body is neurologically broken and fix it by going directly to the brain through implants.
Yeah. So things like I think vision was one of them, and I think like even quadriplegic and a variety. It's not just one thing that it can fix.
Right.
It's pretty versatile.
Yep.
And you, I guess, plug it into that part of your brain.
Right.
And it circumvents whatever's wrong.
That's
I
right.
mean, that's big thinking.
Yeah. Well, but think about all the people that will
incredible.
be able to benefit from that. Now you can obviously run the conspiracy theory into the ground, but the reality of it is, humans being the next generation of humans isn't it's that, right? It's a combination of us interwoven into technology. Mm-hmm. And it'll be really start out, I think, because there's going to be obvious health benefits to it. It'll be able to monitor
radical health benefits.
Right. It'll be a thing that's monitoring your health, fixing problems, not just essentially taking logs of what your cardiac activity is, for example. There'll be technology that's created that will be able to literally fix the problems as they're happening in our bodies, not trying to fix it after the damage has been done.
Right. I mean, you thought iWatches were cool because they could monitor your heart rate. This goes way beyond monitoring. This goes into diagnostics and treatment, which is, I think, the next natural progression. And I think it's going to take a bit for people to adopt that and accept it. But what radical thinking? I think that's what got you on that tangent. With Elon.
Well, Sunday's all about tangents, right?
No, I know.
And so if
but it's thinking bigger, and it's saying, I wonder what would happen if.
Right.
And
so
that's interesting.
I'm wondering that, like, as I prepare this week for coaching calls and I prepare this week for all of our podcasts and just all the other things you and I do, so if you and I, we have tens of thousands of people that listen to our podcast every single day, mm-hmm. right? This is the number one listened to daily podcast for real estate agents in the world, probably. And if not, it will be by the time we're done. See, I'm thinking big.
I
right?
hope so.
You and I have coaching clients now, and certainly United States, Canada. Mm-hmm. We're starting to get some in Australia, New Zealand.
Yep.
Really any place in the country or any place in the world that speaks English. Julie and I are starting to, our podcast and the messaging that we have is starting to, I think, really resonate with people. And that's not surprising, to be honest with you, because all we're really effectively doing is telling the truth. Mm-hmm. That is what we're doing. We're telling people a practical, tactical way that they can build financial freedom for themselves through having real estate licenses. And really how this is, I was listening to, this is not a tangent, I promise. I was listening to a reading, I don't even remember what, we consume so much real estate information. But if you think about real estate during, maybe this becomes a depression and stays a depression for a while or a long-term recession. Mm-hmm. If you're going to sell something or be in an industry, you sure as shit want to be in something that's not, that's required that people buy, right?
Yeah.
You want to be in selling something that everybody needs. If you're selling something
ideally.
that people don't need, luxury items, for example, boats, things like that, I don't necessarily think if I were a salesperson and I was selling stuff like that I would feel that financially secure given the uncertainty in the global economy.
Well, I mean, remember, some of the original wealthy Americans got that way because of utilities.
Yeah,
because people wanted electricity.
Well, and railroads.
Water.
You're talking about industrial revolution
sure.
stuff. But so if you think about all the ways that all of us are blessed to be in this industry, I'll tell you what, if you are really willing to do the real work of real estate right now, there's never been a better time to be in this industry.
No, that's for sure. And I see from my coaching calls mainly, and people that email us from the podcasts and stuff, I see the buyers and sellers who have an actual real need. They're not moving recreationally. They're not moving just to cash out. They have real motivation, okay, which is always the best clients because they're the ones that, comply with the process. They are much more welcoming now to skilled and caring agents. Not that they weren't before, but there was kind of, I don't know, there was a little bit more leeway, a little bit less responsiveness. If you actually really have to sell your house right now, you are craving somebody saying, here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to comply with the new protocol. Here's where I'm going to put it to get the most exposure. Here's how I'm going to handle your transaction. You have nothing to worry about. Put it in my hands. And, for example, people that prospect and, maybe would have been more struggling, the reporting back that I get from our real estate agent community and brokers is they're like, wow, these like just examples of people who say please and thank you for helping me, and you alleviated my stress.
Well, there's right now a reprieve from having to have a high level understanding of how to solve complex problems for sellers right now because of the mortgage forbearances and because of all the financial lifelines that are coming out from the
temporarily
government.
Anyway.
So we're living in this time of...
It's like a time warp of mortgages.
Well, it's the great pause, right?
Yeah.
So this is the great pause before the reality sets in to the economy and whatnot. And this great pause, I think, will happen through at least the election because there will be no precipitous drop in real estate values or anything else until after the election takes place. And then at that point, a lot of these lifelines are going to be pulled. And I'll give you, for example, there was the Senate is talking about giving people a going back to work bonus where the Democrats want to continue the federally backed unemployment. Right. So the Senate is saying, look, we can't make it so that people can earn more money not working than working because then they're never going to go back to work. Duh. Right. And then,
already have examples of that.
Oh yeah, we talked. We talk about this on our podcast every day. The unintended consequences of all the bailouts. But the reality of it is that there are so many different things that are going to come unraveled towards the end of this year that there is absolutely no doubt. And I don't think anyone's really come up with a real, a decent argument why there isn't going to be a worsening of essentially all the economy on a whole. There just is too much unemployment. There's been too many businesses destroyed. The true destruction from the great pandemic and all the economic shutdown hasn't been felt yet because of the fact that there's been so much money pumped into the economy. And there can't be an endless amount of money pumped into the economy. At some point that ends. If for no other reason than just truthfully, there'll have to be a breaking point where where the government and essentially business is going to say enough is enough. So there won't be political will, I guess, is at the end of the day, why there's not going to be a continuation of it. And we're not going to talk about monetary theory. We're not going to talk about inflation, deflation today. What we are going to talk about is that, and we keep on circling around and around about this, is really, are you thinking big enough? Are we thinking big enough? In the light of all the headwinds that are seemingly everywhere for everyone right now, are you allowing yourself to be sucked in to thinking small? Because right now is the best time probably, of our adult lives, that's for sure, to be thinking big.
Well, absolutely. So it would be so easy to use some of the things that are going on in the world as your excuse to think smaller instead of bigger, or to give yourself the out to not even really be thinking at all. So instead, take a radical approach to your goals.
Exactly.
Take a radical time frame. How fast could you make it to your magic number of listings?
Well, let's even make it more,
practical.
Tasty than that.
Yeah. Well,
not less practical. Let's not be practical for a second, okay? So what would be
Coaching
radical? Well, I mean, what would be radical so again, we didn't finish this point before. To the point you're trying to make, I think, is that yes, it's important that when you're setting goals, you set goals that you can accomplish. Those would be your short-term goals. That's your practical, everyday type thing. But in order to basically start developing the mindset of being able to go to Mars, you're going to have to think impractically. You're going to have to think crazy. You're going to have to think about things that even when you write them down or when you conceive the thought, your first thought is, no frickin' way I'll be able to do that. But there are things that all of us have that as dreams that we face our inner skeptic almost the second we hit that thought. We the second you have the thought of, let's keep on circling back to Elon. This is Elon Day since he actually was successfully in taking humans back. Yeah, exactly. So the second Elon had the thought, why don't I make rockets? Why don't I basically get people to Mars? If he had shut that down, the second he had that thought, because it's not like he didn't have people around him that are saying, dude, what are you thinking? You are to be, you're crazy.
He probably fired all of them, but.
Yeah, come on, electric car boy. Let's
just stick it to cars. You're doing that pretty good.
Come on, Elon. You got enough on your plate.
Yeah.
But what are the things, like, if you were to say 5 years from now, what were the things you would like to have accomplished? So I wrote that question down, actually, for you and I. So what are the 5-year goals? And then, here's the fun part. What would it take to accomplish those 5-year goals in 12 months?
Yeah. That's the radical part.
That's the radical part. And that's what you were saying Elon does.
Right.
And people criticize him constantly.
Well,
for that.
his name escapes me, Apple.
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. Okay, so he was often criticized for the same reason
Yep.
as Elon. They even called it the Steve Jobs time warp or something like that.
Yeah.
His company had given him a nickname for setting radically short deadlines. So let's say you don't hit it exactly in 12 months, but because you said 12 months is better than 5 years, it takes you 18. It's still much shorter
Right.
than what you normally would have done. And I think, there's a reason that the treasure map is not a 5-year plan. It's because you give yourself 5 years. Why would you get off your butt today?
So treasure map, by the
know
way,
what I'm
guys,
saying?
is well, yeah, definitely the treasure. Well, I mean, again, you and I had the idea a year ago of moving to Puerto Rico, but just to close
We did
that
that
loop,
in a radically short amount of time.
we did that in a radically short period of time. We
Yeah.
basically sold our house in Texas. We weren't even emotionally ready to detach from all of it. We just made the decision to do it.
Yep.
But look at all the things that have improved in our life since
Sure.
making the decision to move here that it didn't even have as a thought.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Still realizing
It's shocking.
daily. Yeah.
Yeah, right? You're still catching up
Oh,
with
we
it.
haven't even been here a year.
I know.
I
know.
Yeah. Crazy.
But we're still catching up with it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the shorter time frame.
Real
So-
estate treasure map.
Yeah.
So we have to do some call to action, Julie.
I'm circling my way back to
I
that.
know.
Yeah.
I think we have like 6 competing thoughts going on at once,
It's all
but
right.
we're
Sunday.
having fun. It's Sunday.
Yeah.
So, listeners, if you want to get the real estate treasure map, it is free, and all you have to do is text the word survival to 31996. Texting the word survival to 31996 will give you free access to our free coaching program that we made as a result of the pandemic. Well, so there you go. There's another unintended consequence of a really horrible thing. Because of the horrible pandemic, Julie and I decided to make a nationwide coaching program to help all the agents out there. Now, don't be fooled. The coaching program is, a mere whisper of what our normal coaching program is, but it does give you essentially all the fundamentals and all the do this now type, immediate action plans that all of you guys need. And it does also entitle you to a daily semi-private coaching call, and it is free. All you got to do is text the word survival to 31996, and when you do, we're going to text you back a link. You have to set up your username and password, and then you're going to be able to log right into the website, and you're going to see exactly what you get. And I think based on all the feedback, people are blown away by what we're giving away for free. But one of the things is the Real Estate Treasure Map, which is our fill-in-the-blank business plan, which does, I think, put you in a position where you could start thinking more radically. You could start developing your Elon Musk and maybe Steve Jobs type
Mindset.
wavelengths. Wavelengths?
Mindset.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that mindset
I
word.
know. It's got too many
Too many-
landmines embedded
Yeah,
in it.
exactly.
But
Well,
way of thinking, we'll say.
the whole mindset movement has become a bit of a religion that we rally against because a lot of it's hocus pocus.
Yeah.
But, all right, so more things. I'm looking at my yellow piece of paper with regards to big and short term goals. So if you could accomplish your 5-year goals in 12 months, now the first things people are going to have a hard time with is thinking about what their 5-year goals are, right?
Yeah.
Most people are.
Sure.
So there are 5, maybe 6 distinct categories of goal setting, but the ones that all of you guys should focus on, really this is honestly depending on your age, are financial, physical, and mental. So when you're thinking in terms of, okay, well, again, this is all real estate treasure map type stuff, and so you guys can just download this, and it's a step-by-step fill-in-the-blank plan. But you choose, for example, the physical thing. Now, I was having this thought when I was writing all these thoughts down this morning, these notes. Like, if you and I were back in Columbus, Ohio, growing up basically within the 25-mile circumference of where we were born,
Right.
which an interesting statistic, listeners, and we're not criticizing, just stating a fact, most people are born and die within the same 25-mile radius of, the same exact spot. They're born in the same hospital, they die in the same hospital type situation. Those are just, an interesting set of facts. And I wonder how far outside of the United States that's true for. I bet you that's a global thing.
I think in Europe it's even tighter.
Probably.
Because people have family homes in Italy that have
Yep.
been around for, generations.
Yep, I think so too. And you have generational households as
Yeah.
a norm, and you don't have that here. That's probably true. But if we were still living in Columbus, Ohio, and we'd never left, how different would our lives be? And again, I'm not criticizing Columbus, but in Columbus, people did not, generally speaking, you and I were fish out of water
Just
there.
your travel mindset is like, you go to Florida.
Yeah.
You don't.
Or you go up to the
Lake Erie.
Lake Erie, right?
You have kind of a small radius of what seems like interesting travel. And all those things are interesting, but not, 20 years in a row necessarily. But yeah, it would be different, and that's a good place to start when you're goal setting. Is, what's my current radius of thought and of travel and of exposure. I'll never forget a coaching call when I was starting to do the treasure map years ago, and it is a fill in the blank personalized business plan, because you are forced to set goals and time frame and have probably some new thoughts. But I'll never forget, I was talking to it, and this was a California agent, and she was struggling with goal setting, and I said, well, one of the things that we have coaching clients do sometimes is go to the magazine section in Barnes & Noble and just pick out like 6 or 8 magazines that you have some level of interest. Maybe one's travel, maybe one's like exercise. And she said, what's Barnes & Noble?
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, lack of exposure. I need to maybe start at a different spot.
You're saying it perfectly, Julie. But to kind of bring because you and I are talking about Barnes & Noble, which is literally not in existence anymore.
But people know what it is.
And magazines, which actually some people don't even read anymore.
Let's call it Zinio on your iPad. we can convert. But the point is, try some stuff out. And I, now in coaching, I use meetup.com to expose them, which is not a dating site, skeptics. It is where people go to post their meetings and their, you can find anything from a hiking club to a photography club to whatever, but try stuff out.
What you're talking about essentially is the fact that your environment and the people that are around you 100% almost control the outcome that you're going to experience in life in more profound ways you can possibly imagine. I remember when Julie and we'd been married, a year or two, and we had never really been outside of Columbus, Ohio. And this was before the internet, for all of you guys that I know it makes us sound, that's such a weird thing to say,
I know.
But it was before the internet, and we had
before cell phones.
We had a nautical blue Mark I Miata. Yeah. And we drove from Columbus, Ohio, all the way out to Washington State. Seattle, yeah. And in the Miata, right? And we did not have any. It was crazy. If you think about having to do that now, no way.
I don't even think we had phones with us.
But I remember the first time you and I were out. I don't think we did either.
No,
but
we used paper maps.
We did. Yeah, we went to a AAA and had them make a triptych or something. Yeah. Isn't that hilarious to think about now? Anyway, so
millennials are like, you weren't eaten by wolves? You're okay?
No, actually, we were practically eaten by wolves.
We were. It was actually locusts in Utah.
It was. And then we accidentally drove through a bike week in South Dakota without knowing about it. We're like, damn, people love their motorcycles out here. And then finally we get closer to Sturgis, and the closer we got, the more motorcycles we saw. And then someone finally told us, are y'all going to bike week? It's like, what the hell is bike week?
I know. Lack of exposure.
Well, so that's the main thing. I remember when you and I got out west and we started seeing how beautiful out west is, really.
Yeah.
Through Montana, we went through Red Lodge, we went through, all these beautiful places, the mountains and the ranges and just the different types of people you run into and just everything. Shockingly beautiful. So different than where we're from. And when we're from, there's no topography to speak of. You go down southern Ohio, that's, it's beautiful down there. But where Julie and I are from, basically when it was settled, it was all made into farm fields. And essentially that's what it still looks like. Now there's just lots of houses in the farm fields. I'm not overstating that either. So when you get out west, things look so different and so beautiful. And I remember calling my dad when you and I are on this huge sojourn. And I remember calling him emotional and telling him how free and alive you and I were feeling because we were finally seeing something that was so radically different than everything that we'd ever experienced before being from Ohio and the sheer lack of exposure. And then I remember feeling that feeling again when you and I went out to like Palm Desert in California.
Yep, I was thinking that too.
In the winter, in the mountains in Palm Desert, they turn purple when the sun's going down. It was so beautiful. And then you and I were obviously travel addicts before we had Zoe, and we would go to Europe and all these other things. And just if you were to go to different parts of the world and you were to be around just different environments, that in itself is just, it's like a spiritual experience if you allow it to be. And there's a lot of psychological reasons for that too, guys. The very definition of being present is when you're standing in the middle of Milan, and in Italy, and you're around buildings and people and things and clothes and smells and everything around you is so completely different that you've never experienced before, you can't help but to be present because your brain and your body, all your senses are just firing off, just taking in all the environment. That is an absolutely purifying experience that forces. I suppose you could be there and you could be closed-minded and say, "Oh, I don't like how tall and beautiful everybody is."
Well,
I don't like these beautiful clothes. Oh, that food smells too good. I miss Wendy's back in Columbus, Ohio. I suppose you could go there and ruin it for yourself. But when you allow yourself to go outside of your environment, it's lack of exposure is the point I'm trying to make. It wasn't until you and I really forced ourselves to have different levels of exposure that we realized how much more life had to offer. And they weren't just platitudes and motivational posters. And we were kids when we forced ourselves to experience that. But even before that, Julie, when you and I were in Columbus and we had the car cleaning and detailing business,
that was interesting exposure.
We were blessed with a lot of really wealthy, Les Wexner, who was a billionaire.
That's a side point that's really critical, okay? Related to goal setting. Part of the treasure map there's 12 or 14 questions for each that are all the same questions applied to each goal. And one of them is, do you know someone who has done this before?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think part of the issue with wanting to obtain more wealth, more income, I mean, things are better with money. I don't think anybody will argue with that. Don't even tell me I'm not in it for the money, because if you were, you can just go to 0% commission on every deal from here forward.
We did, just a side note, don't lose your thought, please. It was a good one. I knew you were going. We did a series of podcasts last year about what Julie just said. Essentially, everything's better with money. And I think that if you search on our website, timandjulieharris.com, or if you go to iTunes, I think it's You Have a Moral Obligation to Be Rich.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
That's the name of it.
You need to listen to that series of podcasts, because I think that was some of the best content Julie and I have ever produced. Because you really do have a moral obligation to be rich. You really do. And I mean it in the most literal sense. You can do so
much more with it. If you want to use Elon as an example, people criticize him. He's a billionaire, not a millionaire, okay? But look what he's able to do. I mean, he's working on ways to make quadriplegics walk again. You can't do that if you're broke.
So this is Elon Day. We officially declared it. But I'll tell you another funny thing, and then don't lose your train of thought.
Yeah.
And so when he sold his portion of PayPal, he was partners with other people. Right? I think he said he got $300 million. And he said he put like $100 million down on Tesla, $100 million down on SpaceX, and $100 million down on Solar City. Mm-hmm. And then the joke that he said was, and after that I had to borrow money to pay my rent.
And that's true. I mean, we listened to his, it was either, I don't think he wrote it. It was a biography about him and I didn't know that. I thought it was fascinating that he went from that $300 million payout to basically having to borrow money and coming back from that.
Yep.
And now he's doing these things that he's doing now. I mean, that's amazing for a guy who's less than 50 years old to have gone
By the way,
through all that.
Elon's not our only transcendental.
No, but he's on our mind because.
But look at Jeff Bezos, for example.
Yeah.
Everyone associates him with Amazon, obviously. Mm-hmm. Thank God bless Amazon. I don't think you and I would be able to survive in Puerto Rico without Amazon. But the reality of it is he also has essentially his own interstellar space project similar to SpaceX. I don't remember what it's called.
Something? I can't remember.
Blue Origin or something?
I think that's right.
Yeah. And
that was also funded partially by NASA.
Right. Was it?
Yep.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, so go back. Do you remember your train of thought?
Okay. So in the treasure map, where the overriding topic is thinking bigger and getting back to some goal setting here, some radical goal setting. Part of what stymies some of our listeners, and I have to say, maybe even us until we moved here, and we have friends living here that jet off to Dubai for a weekend, But one of the questions is, who do you know who is at this level? What are your thoughts about that person and that earning level? And I think that it's easy to be critical about wealthy people, for example. Some of our listeners inevitably have those
that's
thoughts.
lack of exposure,
It's lack of exposure because you don't know anybody who's earned at that level and handled themselves in such a way that you have respect for them, you understand what they're doing, you see the impact that they're having, not just on their family and themselves, but on the world. Maybe you don't have that exposure. And I think it's harder to think big if you just don't know anybody who's been there. Like, if the next level to you in your center of influence, okay, like the wealthiest person works at some corporation, makes $100,000 a year. I mean, there's people that's like the highest level they can think of because that's the highest level they've seen.
I think one of the reasons it's confusing to a lot of people is because it's politically correct right now to make a statement that
there's that too.
I want to be I want to create this business for, the sake of the environment or whatever. There's all these people are afraid to be honest with themselves that they're almost always operating out of self-interest.
Yeah.
And they're afraid to admit that they want things, and they're afraid to admit that they want to have experiences. They're afraid to verbally say, because they don't want to be criticized or judged,
Yep.
that they want anything better than what they have. And that's the lack of exposure that I was referring to. And when you and I lived in Columbus, Ohio, with the exception of our car cleaning and detailing customers, which we were very blessed to have so many that gave a shit about us, and then some of them took us under their arm and were our accidental, mentors to us in our formidable years. We had quite a few people that were, some of them were hundreds of millions.
They were early influencers, and I do consider that a blessing that you and I both had that early exposure to people that were wealthy, handled themselves well, and, were contributors.
And we'd made a list. This was back when Julie and I were in college. We made a list of the people in Columbus, Ohio, who had the biggest, groups of cars, and some of them were well-off doctors, but most of them were car collectors. There's old money in Columbus. You guys don't know, but some of these Midwestern towns have some of the oldest, wealthiest families in the United States. They just don't brag on it.
Yeah.
So you'll have people that, were part of the Industrial Revolution that still have kept their familial wealth. There's beautiful old mansions in an area called Bexley, Ohio, that we used to have customers there. There was this one family named the Wasserstroms, and when we were working for them, they always had 5 or 6 Mercedes, and most of them weren't new. They were older. But I remember the first time I met with them, they didn't know me from Adam, but maybe after a year, they basically they adopted Julie and I, and were some of the nicest people we ever worked with. Well, guess where they made their money? They were one of the original manufacturers of industrial kitchen stainless steel stuff.
Yeah,
that's where they made their money.
I remembered them being appliance people.
Yeah, and that was it. But they were so nice, and they were so generous to us. And there was a guy named, who are still alive, Jack Rosselli, and he owns a commercial. He was 3rd or 4th generation. His family came from the old world in Italy, and they were in the construction business. And Jack was always kind of a gruff guy to us. His wife was always so sweet.
She was awesome.
But after, over time, they began to sort of, they never I don't think they became overly familiar with us, but they definitely appreciated us and definitely treated us with respect. And they showed us, basically those people and a whole bunch of others, completely and totally proved that our preconceived notions of the software we were carrying around with regards to rich people was complete and utter bullshit.
Well, they would invite us to their parties.
They would. We went
I
to
still have a scar on my foot right here from Muffy, the dog that we dogs had when they traveled.
Yeah. I mean, they would have us to their birthday parties. They would invite us to their... You walk into, I have so many of these bizarre experiences that you and I were we were late teenagers, right? 19, 20, 21. And, somewhere in there.
Well, and, we had some experiences certainly in our real estate practice, too, like Dr. Pala and, even Dr. Blatnick, who was kind of a bridge between the two. We just some really good, classy people who appreciated that we were working our butts off. And maybe they saw something in us at that time, but I think, and we didn't even realize it probably at the time, we just appreciated them. Because they gave us business, they referred people to us, they invited us to their parties, they gave us opportunity that we would not otherwise have had.
They did. They liked the fact
and that was awesome.
They liked the fact that we were scrappers, I think, at the end of the day.
And you and I see that in other people too.
You can't smell it on
you
somebody.
Absolutely can.
Yeah.
You can. When we first moved here, Miguel, our property manager, that guy hustles, man. It's amazing.
But Julie,
you do notice it.
This goes back to the lack of exposure, right?
Yes.
So if you have a preconceived notion that rich people are evil, which is ingrained in a lot of us at a very young age, involuntarily.
Yeah, you might even not notice. You might not acknowledge that that's your underlying thought, but if somebody puts you on the spot, it would come out.
And then you reinforce that by never having exposure to rich people. Well, guess what, listeners? You're listening to a couple of rich people. Are we assholes?
I have an interesting demonstration of that. It was one of my Facebook friends from high school who was driving through, and it had to be, I think he still lives in Columbus. He was driving through a neighborhood and he said, I just can't believe how quintessential American this is. People are out, riding their bikes and having hot dogs on the grill and everything. And and he was alluding that that it must have been like a certain political angle that he believed about this neighborhood he was driving through. And then he went back and corrected his post. He said, I actually researched it and it wasn't anything that I thought. They actually voted like more like him or something. It was a preconceived notion that he wanted to believe about that.
Well, so
that he then revised by actually doing his research.
So you can tell, and we are going to be political here, that his go-to software was liberal leaning, and then went back and realized he was wrong.
Yes,
yeah,
that's exactly right.
But see, guys,
but that was he didn't even realize until he did the research that he was operating off of his ingrained belief structure.
And that is the ultimate.
And I thought it was interesting.
That's the ultimate lack of exposure.
That's right.
And how much does that's old software, like, Julie and I are 49 and 50, okay? And we work on ourselves every day, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We're not allowing ourselves to be complacent, probably because of our pack. It's not anything that makes any. If Julie and I were still in Columbus, Ohio, my point is that we would probably live, we would, like our environment. We would.
Sure,
We'd both be heavier, probably be wrinklier, right? We wouldn't be as wealthy as we are.
Those chocolate and peanut butter Buckeyes are awfully good.
Oh, dude, are you kidding me? And how many different incredible places can you go in Columbus for pizza? Give me a freaking break.
Every corner.
I mean, I weighed more. You weighed more when you lived there because there was lack of exposure. And the thing is you just start to get older faster because of lack of exposure. Now, can you live in an environment like that and not be like that and not suffer from lack of exposure? Of course, but it's a hell of a lot harder. But I'll tell you,
you have to work harder.
You do.
Yeah.
But if you put yourself... Now, am I telling all of you guys to get up and move? Maybe. Yeah, maybe that's the move, honestly. Pun intended. But really, you can get exposure just from being exposed to people that think bigger and bolder.
You have to look for it, I think, is the point we're trying to make, is you have to make the effort. It's not going to happen to you. People who are like who you want to become are not going to come looking for you.
No.
You have to look for them. They're out doing their thing. They're the way they are because they are being... proactive. You're going to have to go out there and find them. And even here, I have to make myself find even a book club, which I wanted to try out. I have to be like, all right, let's get out and do some stuff and find some things. And when we're out of lockdown, I'd like to go to that bioluminescent lagoon on the other side of the island. And, but you have to write it down, put it into action and say, you know what, I'm going to do this on this date or by this date. And that's how it's going to be.
And, think about the ladies that are in your book club.
Yeah.
I mean, one of them is probably a billionaire, and I'm sure
all
around.
Oh, my goodness.
But here you are. You're just little geeky Julie Guthrie, who was in the band, marching band,
one time in band camp.
From Worthington, Ohio. Oh, yes, her name is Julie. Yes, she played flute. And yes, she does say one time in band camp.
That's right. I can still be that person, but also have this exposure to... I mean, you're right. Well, at least one of the ladies there is a probably billionaire, if not multi-millionaire. And a lot of the other... I think there's 12 of them. Every single one of them either has their own business, that has it together with their spouse, has family business, and they're all very diverse. And I find it fascinating how they think and what they're interested in, and it's just really awesome.
One of the things that you don't hear or even feel when you're around successful people, and we're going to benchmark the word successful around monetarily successful, okay? Just let's keep this real, are limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
You have to almost, you'll be surprised when you hear somebody who's financially successful ever say anything that would indicate that they're suffering from a lack of belief of what they're capable of.
That's true.
Yeah. But you experience that constantly with people that are not financially successful.
Yeah. I think it's confidence, and a lot of that comes from experience. With regards to our coaching clients, we talk to them a lot about, just go on the appointments. It's okay to fail sometimes. You got to earn while you learn. Don't not take action because you're busy studying it to the ends of the earth. You got to get out there and take that risk. One of the things that we do with we've got a new agent action plan as well, and that is a rapid, I call it backfilling their lack of experience, right? Because they have an experience deficit. When you first get your license in real estate, you are probably only going to show properties in your zip code that you grew up in, where your first open house was, in the price range you're comfortable in. So one of the things that we do with new agents, for example, with regards to exposure, is take a week, and preview your market from the least common denominator up to the luxury market. So you actually are comfortable showing something that's $1 million.
So, but let's make this really practical,
Yeah.
because this is how Julie and I know what we're saying is true. So when we first got married, when we were 20 and 21, we bought our first house basically about the same time, and it was 280 East Jeffrey.
So about 3 square feet.
It was 750 square feet,
Yeah.
which, by the way, I wish we still owned that house.
Me too.
It basically tripled in value.
I know.
But I know, which is insane. Anyway, the house was $78,500, wasn't it? Something like that. $71,575. That's right.
And the payment was $550 a month because interest rates were, wait for it, a radical 7%, which some of you guys would have a heart attack if you had to have a 7% mortgage rate. But at the time, it was extremely low.
And they made us come up with $15,000 down.
Yep.
And this is basically while we were just essentially still in college. We didn't get through it in 4 years.
Yep.
So why am I telling you all this? Because what we would do, if we started selling real estate in Clintonville, where we had our first house, on the very streets that were around where our first house was, then we started expanding a little bit to Worthington. Julie and I were following the same pattern. And then there was this other community that wasn't so far away by distance, but far away in every other conceivable way from us, called New Albany, Ohio. And there was this particular area inside New Albany, Ohio called New Albany Country Club. If you guys, all of you, should Google New Albany Country Club, New Albany, Ohio Country Club, and see how unbelievably gorgeous this place is. Well, long story short, we used to go out there, and Julie and I would park our car, and then we would go on a walk as if we lived there. We'd walk around the golf course. Of course, we didn't live there. People were, guess what, surprisingly friendly, you know? And we'd walk around the golf course. We weren't selling any real estate there. We didn't know anything about it. And then occasionally we'd go and show ourselves a house that was out there just so we can go inside these homes.
We went to the Parade of Homes. We
Yeah.
got some exposure out of it.
I remember how shocked the first Parade of Homes they had out there. When we went out there, it was just like maybe 3 streets, and we walked into houses that we had never, ever... some of our detail customers maybe, but they were so flippin' gorgeous.
Stunning.
Stunning. Just shockingly stunning. For us at the time, right? And so from that point, we said, you know what? We are uncomfortable being out here. This is not where we're from.
Didn't grow up as a country club
Right.
kid. None of that.
And all the agents out there, they all knew each other from private schools. They'd all gone to boarding schools in the East Coast. They'd all basically gone to, most of them had gone to really nice colleges. They all knew each other growing up. The families knew each other. That Julie and I were completely and totally, we shouldn't be there. And they basically told us that. The agents did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They
what
hated
was
us.
saying, we were here first and we know the area best?
Yeah, they used to say that. Yeah, they hated Julie and I because they knew that we were, frankly, in Columbus, ultra successful real estate agents. And the last thing they wanted in their little protected golden cage was, Julie and I. Well, we kept at it. We were, what was it, 5 years, maybe 4 years since we got into real estate. And then finally, we mustered the courage and the money, frankly, to buy a really beautiful house there.
Yeah.
And then we were, we had National Association of Realtors did this big article on us after we sold over 100 houses our first year in real estate, which is a totally different conversation. We did it the way we still coach you guys to do it, which is still practical and puts money in your pocket the quickest. But so we sold 100 houses our first year. National Association of Realtors gave us all this, attention and articles, and we went on a speaking tour. We wrote our first book. All this happened basically when we were early 20s, mid 20s and almost. And then when we moved out now, why did we go from in this very safe, protected environment where we could benchmark selling at least 100 to 200 homes per year? We knew it like the back of our hands. People knew us. We had centers of influence. We had past clients. We knew exactly what to do, how to do it. We had a support structure around us. Julie, we knew it backwards and forwards. We knew every alley, every street. We knew every
Still do.
business owner. Yeah, we still do because we have droves
Rentals.
of rental properties there. But how did we go from thinking that just not saying this is where we want to be? Agents that we knew and we love and we respect are still selling real estate there. And then how did we go from being essentially top dogs in that environment to basically saying we're going to move across town to this environment that's totally unfamiliar and uncomfortable with us? What caused us to do that was because we wanted something better and bigger, and we realized that we were frankly becoming complacent and bored in the market we were in. I was reading, this is kind of, I didn't tell you this, I was reading the article that National Association of Realtors wrote about us in the first year, and they interviewed us. And after selling all those houses, and we had said, you and I both in this article said some things that were prophetic?
Prophetic, yeah.
Prophetic, wrong. F, not
Close
TH.
enough.
Yeah, and we're talking about the fact that you and I thought that the business that we'd created, that we'd want to iterate it within a certain amount of time. Like, I guess we were trying to sound like we were a lot smarter than we were, but you know what? We did it.
I think you're talking about how we didn't want to be in real estate forever or something like that.
We didn't want to be in real estate forever.
Yeah.
We had decided that wasn't something we wanted to do forever because I don't know why.
But I think at the time, I don't think
it was the same reason Elon says he wants to go to Mars.
That's it. I don't think that we knew that what we did want to do was coaching it. I mean, podcasting hadn't even been invented for years.
No.
So what ended up was not exactly what our thought was, but the thought was the catalyst to take action. And I think that that's the thing to embrace, is that you don't have to have all of the answers. You don't even have to have all the questions. You just have to continually be moving forward, and then you'll discover the right path.
And I think where you get screwed in life is where you get to a point where everyone starts saying you're successful, where you start feeling like you're successful, where you start allowing complacency to creep in. You know, for example, I'm going to talk about something sort of personal.
Depends. What is it?
No, I'm not going to talk about sex dolls this week.
Okay, that's
good. Oh, God, now people are listening. Jesus, what the hell is they?
They're searching for that
They're
podcast.
searching. Chuba and Julie are talking about sex dolls? Yes,
What?
because one of the businesses that was growing, as I read this on Bloomberg or Seeking Alpha, that the sex dolls business was growing the fastest right now that it ever has before because of the hookup sites were no longer working because the pandemic.
You can leave your house.
Right. I just thought that was a funny little anecdotal, thing. Anyway, you can listen to last Sunday's podcast if you want to hear about that. But, like, you have, and so here's what I think. I have an obligation to you to look good, right? I have an obligation to you to look as physically and mentally attractive as I possibly can, because that's the commitment I made to you when we got married.
I to you. That was like the deal we made.
But I think a lot of people, it was part of the deal, right? It's part of your marital vows, right?
Yeah.
And I think what happens, a lot of people, and you can comment on this more than me, I think, because this mostly is, I mean, why do women, or why do men, why do married couples get to the point where they start to not concern themselves with how they look towards each other physically? They get to a point.
I mean, I don't know.
Let me add a little bit more anecdotal information.
Sure.
Because when we were growing up, people our age definitely got crusty.
Well, that's true. And I think that, like many things in life, it's a gradual degradation that becomes acceptable without you even knowing it.
Because of environment.
Because of environment, but also because of your own mental tolerance and how you're thinking about things. And it applies to pretty much everything. I mean, as you get older, you have to work on your brain more. And it's easy to say, oh, I've always thought by the time I got to be 50 that, it's all downhill from here. People say stuff like that. And it's the same with gaining weight, eating crappy food, being complacent in your business, deciding that, this is as much as you're ever going to be able to save. And you know what? I'm so close to being able to get Social Security, it doesn't matter anyway. I mean, you hear all of these things, and I think that people would not necessarily outwardly say that's how they're thinking, but that's how they're acting.
Because they're benchmarking themselves against familiar behavior that came from essentially their parents. So this is where I was going.
Or even their best friends, or whoever their sphere is.
But if you and I were still living in Columbus, Ohio, and it sounds like we're picking on Columbus, we're not.
Seriously.
But it does though. Or anywhere, right? And everyone like
Normal Town, USA.
Normal Town, USA. And everyone essentially, without realizing it, we're following the same behavioral patterns. They're mirroring essentially the generation before them.
Sure.
And what they don't realize, and this is the thing that is happening right now, I think more so than any other time in our life. I mean, we started out by talking about how many things have changed in the last 6 months. But think about how many things are changing forward. So, you and I are, let's say, at half-life, right?
Right.
So if we start benchmarking ourselves and how our parents, who are be the things that we'd subconsciously model ourselves off after, I think that'd be the most, right?
Probably.
I mean, my dad died when he was, how old was he?
74.
74. My other grandparents, some of the ladies lived over 100. The men lived in mostly their 80s and all of this. And, I remember, you guys, listeners, you'll remember this too. When I went to visit my great-grandparents and my grandparents and all that, I remember at our age, when they were our age, I remember how they, you can look at pictures, how they looked and how they behaved and all of that.
Yeah.
And it's because they were modeling themselves after the generation that came before them. Our parents were modeling themselves, without knowing it, on their parents. And so if you were in a world where you had lack of exposure and you were, without knowing it, the software that was loaded into your brain, without knowing it, was that software that you had gotten from your parents, that they got from their grandparents, So that's one of the reasons when you stop learning.
Yeah.
You stop caring without knowing it, I think, consciously, because you think it's normal.
Sure. I think that there's a gradual pairing of your memories and your influence, too. I think there's good influences, obviously. But, and I think that you and I were blessed, too, in a lot of ways. We're talking about our own experience, but, our parents were always married. We didn't go through a bunch of divorces. We didn't have alcoholism in our families. We didn't have chain smoking in our families. We were really blessed that way. And I think that people who have, we're talking about lack of exposure, talking about there's a whole other level that we don't always appreciate, except maybe through some of our coaching clients. You could have really radically bad exposure, which is worse than lack of exposure.
Well, but it's kind of the same thing, right?
It's all really, what are your standards, right?
What's your exposure?
Yeah.
So you might think, we were talking about obesity, for example. I don't remember what percent of the population, you might remember.
It's pretty big.
Yeah, of the U.S., are obese, and you start to, the sort of liberal train of thought is, it's because the big food is making crap, and it's not their fault, and poor people don't have proper nutrition, and it's a fat gene, exactly. And then you kind of go and but here's the thing: it's because eating food's fun, it's something good to do, and exercising usually sucks.
Usually.
And if you're around a bunch of people that basically would rather spend their free time, as it were, hanging out and watching football and eating and
Chips
doing the rest of it, all the people around you, as they gradually physically, morph into a larger version of themselves over time, over generation, if that's your exposure and that's what you're constantly reinforcing your exposure around, you prematurely age.
Well, yeah, and it's worse when you try to break out from that and you may or may not get support from that previously.
I'm surprised you said that, actually.
Why? I see it all the time. What happened to us? I've seen coaching clients.
That's the reason I'm surprised you said it.
It's just, that's reality. And, I see that even with like dysfunctional teams in real estate, because that's their tribe.
But Julie, since you brought it up, and I think Sunday we can keep it personal. We don't have to get into,
I'm just saying everybody who's motivated has some level of that.
I don't think that's true. I don't think what you just said is true.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because I think most people will never go to the point where they risk losing the support of their immediate environment.
I'm saying people who stick with their motivation do experience that.
But
you're right. Most people don't. It's too uncomfortable.
Right. It's fear. It's fear of
and
rocking the boat.
Probably that's a little bit worse right now, that people have had to have their support structure really well in place during a pandemic. I think that's maybe highlighted a little bit. And so that's one of the reasons we wanted to get back to halfway through the year. Get on the stick with your goal setting, because it's already been a weird enough year. You've got to have the world has given you a hard reset. You might as well turn that into something positive.
You should. And the hard reset and the new goals should maybe be starting with challenging the way you're thinking about your potentiality on this planet, right? Or evidently any planet, for that matter.
Evidently.
Yeah.
Maybe the space station.
Yeah, maybe aliens. But the point of it is maybe this is the time for you to actually ask yourself, and Julie and I are going to, this is what we are drilling down. And this is the start of a conversation I'm going to have with Julie after this as to whether or not we're thinking too small and where could we think bigger. Where are we holding ourselves back? We have similar conversations that every single day, but we were sort of waiting for the dust to settle to try to make, trying to figure out what the new world was going to look like. We still don't have a clear vision of it. The new normal is definitely abnormal, but we're not going to wait around to figure out what's next, because this is a perfect time to hit hard reset. Even if you love everything about your life, start out and everything's perfect, everything's never been better. Start out by saying to yourself, you know what? how am I thinking too small? Because whatever's perfect about your life now is where you're probably going to be really complacent and regretful for having leveled off in that particular area, maybe only 2 or 3 years from now, because you're going to miss the amazing growth opportunities that all these things. So this pandemic, guys, and what you're seeing and what you're feeling, all the change is going to net in something that's going to be 1,000 times better than what was. How do I know that? Because it's always been that way. Whenever there's been any big radical shift that caused people to panic and worry about their relevance, and it doesn't matter, it could just be the horrible Black Plague in Europe and people have to da-da-da-da. But whatever came after that, what came after the plague?
The Renaissance.
The Renaissance, exactly. So what we're probably going to be entering into is a Renaissance of sorts.
I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, and so you guys, what's the Renaissance? Some of these guys don't know.
Well, I mean, that's...
Lack of exposure. They don't know what the Renaissance is. So just tell them.
I don't have the exact dates, but it was after the plague. Actually, people also don't know there were 3 or 4 rounds of the plague.
Right.
So, and we all got through that. All of your ancestors and relatives got through that one. So
they were still making babies. They were locked up trying to avoid the damn rats, fleas, and because that's where the plague got passed along. In case you guys didn't know that.
Well, so after the Dark Ages, when there wasn't, that's called the Dark Ages because not a lot of intellectual improvements or art or science or any of the benchmarks were just not happening. It was the Dark Ages. And there was plague and there was famine and, like half of Europe was wiped out. But after that is when like not all of, but a great amount of new art and techniques and even, scientific findings, all of that sort of happened after that with a great awakening. Sometimes people call that.
A version of frugality fatigue.
Yeah, like they'd had it, so let's invent some stuff. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll look back at this SpaceX launch as the beginning of something. I think that we definitely have a digital revolution that was forced upon everyone.
Well, that's been in place for a long time, but
the
you're talking
pandemic
about now.
Forcing people to, maybe like the implant that fixes stuff in your body, maybe that's part of it. And maybe people embrace that and there's all kinds of new things that happen. So I believe that will occur.
It feels like that. That's what I want to. It does feel like that. But that's what I want to believe. And
I would like us to be on the precipice of that.
Well, so
maybe we're early on it.
For us personally, and for those who care to keep us part of their lives every day through our podcast and our coaching, that's the path that we're going. We're going to act as if there's an amazing renaissance coming, and we're going to act as if that's going to happen, and maybe it will happen to you as well if you start embracing your potential to actually think and live like that.
You can create your own renaissance.
We have.
Yeah.
We've done it several times.
Absolutely. I think it's a great
overriding
theme. Always ready for another one.
There you go.
Yeah, but you can have your own personal renaissance. Use the treasure map. Figure out what that would mean. And think bigger.
Like, I'll tell you what, just make it this, since we're going to round the bend, is since you said you're always ready for a great renaissance, I think you and I should have a home certainly in Miami. I think we should have a home out someplace in Big Sur or Carmel by the Sea.
Yep.
I think we should have a place in probably Paris because your relatives are French, and I think we should be in, Julie's, we hinted at it earlier, Julie's father's side of the family, they come from a very long line of very famous French people. And I mean, other places too, right?
Sure.
I mean, in the Golden Triangle, where the supercar triangle over in Modena, Italy. I mean, how cool would it be to wake up
why not?
and hear the swan song of a beautiful V12 Lamborghini blasting down the countryside? I'd love that.
You have your version?
Yeah, exactly.
No, but you're right. You're right. And, I think that part of that, I'm inspired also to give Zoe different exposures. And, I mean, we had so we went to Mexico when we were in high school. That's a little bit of something.
With Julie's mom's Spanish class, not by ourselves.
No, definitely wouldn't do that by ourselves. But, I'm inspired to give her those experiences as well. I'm reading, I can't remember the name of the book now. It's Lady in Waiting, and it's about Anne Glenconnon, I believe is her name. She was kind of attached to the royal family, but not royal. And she was talking about all of the experiences she had as a kid. Now, she was a privileged kid. She could travel around to all kinds of different castles. But it makes me think about being 6 years old and having, just radically cool exposure.
I have another proposal for you.
Yeah.
When the gym finally opens up again,
Yeah.
I think we should hire Bella. And Bella, guys,
Oh my
his legs
gosh.
are like tree trunks. This guy's like a little. I mean, I hope he didn't hear me call him little, but he's short.
You will pay for that.
He's shorter than me, and I'm not tall.
But where is he from again?
Bulgaria or something.
Bulgaria.
Yeah,
He just sounds scary.
He does, but he's super nice, a great guy,
Yeah.
but just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And he's our age too.
And he knows how to work out like nobody's.
So I
you
think
will do more reps. You will use more weight. You will suffer.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can hire him.
I think we should
Once
hire
you're
him,
able
and
to.
I think we should start seeing him probably 3 days a week. And I
Sure.
think you and I are in
I'm
good
game.
shape, but I think you and I should basically set a goal of being in pinnacle shape.
Sure.
Like ridiculous. Yeah. Okay. And as far as financial goals,
We will suffer
we've
together.
talked about financial goals all the time, so we know what
Yeah.
those are. Yeah. So I think we
Yeah.
should start thinking bigger.
Well,
like,
we have to set the example.
because it would be too easy for us at this point for you and I just to level off because you know
Sure.
we're living our kind of dream iterations of ourselves. Would
Doesn't
you have,
suck.
Would you have guessed that?
No.
No.
I wouldn't even have guessed back in May of last year until we did.
I know. I feel the ocean
I know.
breeze coming off the. It's unbelievable living here, and
know.
we feel so blessed.
Parrots in the backyard.
Yeah,
Pretty awesome.
And iguanas that are like 5 feet long.
You know what's cool about Puerto Rico? I was telling you this last night when we were at the beach. The ocean, at least where we are in the north central edge of the island, the ocean generally does not try to kill you. We don't have like ginormous. There are areas of the island that are known for surfing, but like you can swim out a good 300 feet and not be sucked
Here.
out to sea.
Here, if you go over to Palmas,
Sure, they're more
Right.
serious, but the water's warm.
Right.
You can swim all year. It's pretty amazing.
yeah, we could tell you guys some stories of things we've seen. Just wouldn't believe it. It's so beautiful here. Well, they have manatees over in Palmas.
Yeah.
And here, this is part of, was it blue whales migration?
Yeah.
And
A few of our neighbors have seen them off the coast.
a true story. Now, we heard this second hand, but here's how the story goes. A guy that lives here was flying in on his private jet from God knows where, probably Miami, and he's flying over the ocean, and he looks out his window. He's not flying himself. He's flown, right? He looks out the window, and he sees a mother whale giving birth into the ocean because the water here is clear. And so he told his jet pilot to circle back around so he could see it again. They didn't go too low to scare the whale, obviously, but he literally was able, from his
Amazing.
private jet window, to watch a whale being born. That's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah.
Should we hate on him because he has a private jet?
No, I don't think so.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
How people are
well, I mean,
thinking.
that's a mindset check, right? So when you hear a story like that, do you say, well, that's just because, you can only have those experiences if you're super rich or whatever your initial judginess is? Or do you go, well, that's pretty awesome. I'd like to have that experience.
And then go online, Google what private jets cost.
And figure that SHIT out.
Yeah, because guess what, guys? A private jet, depending on how old it is not that expensive. You can get a private jet for the cost of what most of you guys are living in as far as a house. Yeah. And you can, research it. I have.
Or at the very least, stop searching on Kayak for $50 tickets where you sit in the back of the plane next to the bathroom and are miserable the whole time. Come on, people.
We used to do that, though.
Yeah, but not forever.
No,
because,
we didn't.
I think that there's value in understanding how much that does suck so
Sure.
that you can set goals.
Dude, we had a car cleaning and detailing business. There was a lot of that sucked.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
But, you knew that. And so we've had that talk about, there's a reason that there are low wage jobs is so that you go have that job and you go, well, this kind of sucks. Maybe I don't want to do it forever.
Totally.
Maybe it's kind of crappy to be $10 away from not being able to make my rent. What can I do to maybe upgrade some things?
That's right.
And it's okay if that's, some of our listeners are working that crappy part-time job and in real estate. So set the goal to lose the crappy part-time job because you figure out how to be a listing agent.
That's right.
It is better.
Are we, so, I always wonder, Julie, because people accuse us of having some je ne sais quoi or having some spark or having, I don't like that when people introduce us that way or talk about us that way because I think it is not true, truthfully. I don't think it's true. You and I were not great students. You were better than me, right? We were not
I
great.
think that we have each other as a strength.
Yeah,
And I
for
think
sure.
That, that's part of it.
But we are great scholars. But what was, if you had to go back in time to when we met in high school, when we, there were books that we were exposed to before we were exposed to people. Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich.
Yep.
And then
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Well, that came later.
But Jack Russell gave
from
you
Jack Russell. But if you look at all these other types of things that kind of enter into our lives, I still don't think I think at the end of the day, the one thing that made us where we are today was that we were, without even knowing the words, very cautious of allowing ourselves to be complacent for too long.
Yes.
And without actually knowing it, we intuitively knew that would lead to a diminished life.
Yes,
I think that was it.
That's true.
Right. And did we learn that anywhere? We didn't learn it from our parents.
No, but I think it was a combination of
exposure.
Giving ourselves exposure. And, if you take our out west trip in the Miata, for example.
I know.
That, we didn't say, I think our first trip we were probably like 22 or something on that trip. We didn't say to each other, okay, let's go do a road trip so that we have better exposure. We didn't say that.
No.
We said, you know what? We have just about detailed our last car for a while. We are sick of this crap. Let's just get in the car and go somewhere.
Yep.
But the consequences that followed that, because we did that, it gets back to the whole, you don't really know where you're headed, just take that first step. I'm really grateful that we did. And we did that several summers in a row. And, now we know what the crispness of Montana smells like.
Yeah.
And
the
have
stars.
Different thoughts. The stars.
Oh my gosh, the stars in Montana at night are
just
like,
all of those
we
things.
Actually, some of you have had this experience, but not many of you. To see the Milky Way,
it's incredible.
It is. When you see a picture of it, right? You think it's fake, right? And I certainly had thought that before.
But to see it with your naked eye, not through a telescope, not through binoculars, that's incredible.
It's spiritual.
It is. It is. I mean, that's something to put on your bucket list.
To see the bend in where we were, you could actually see the horizon bending. I don't even know how to describe it. Honestly,
we've seen that twice. Once in Montana and once in
Arizona.
Sedona.
Yeah.
And seeing the northern lights. Do you remember that was such an odd occurrence? We did see that in New Albany in October.
Right.
Because I remember it happened on Halloween when we were out looking for the kids.
Yep.
To see even red northern lights. That was just amazing.
It was.
So all things to write down is bucket list items.
Yeah, I'll tell you guys about another interesting experience. It was sort of not there's so many, Julie. But look, I could tell, and you and I could tell stories forever about things that we now know in retrospect were
impactful,
transcendental almost, right? And all of them come from us being exposed to new things.
Yeah.
And all of them come from in some cases, there are all things that, like, the times we've been to Europe, and we've been to Europe a bunch of times, and going to Europe and walking around, old Europe is pretty is amazing, because then you, like in Italy, for example, you were mentioning the plague, and you can't walk past anything in Italy where you're not literally tripping over history.
Yeah, awesome.
In England, for example, it's common for them to be digging a foundation for a house and then to dig into Roman artifacts, or them to dig into what was a plague graveyard, and just all these crazy things. So in Europe, you're living constantly around the constant reminder that there are billions of people that came before you and billions of people that will come after you, and I think that's kind of an interesting paradigm shift, especially if you came from a place like where we came from.
Yeah, I mean, we think of history as, a couple hundred years old is old.
Yeah, right.
But how about a couple thousand years old?
I know.
That's when we were walking through Rome and, Roman ruins, you can't just move a giant statue of a sandaled foot easily because it weighs 3,000 pounds, right? So you'd have this semi-modern building next to this really old, crusty, 400 or 500-year-old building next to some piece of a statue on the lawn.
Well, here's another little funny anecdotal story that's just silly, really. So we were in Italy one of the last times, and we had some extra time. We wanted to go to Milan. We'd never been there, coordinating with plane travel, the whole thing. And so we ended up in Milan, and we ended up staying at this hotel, which was, all I remember was, I didn't want you to show me the bill. It was only for 2 nights. It was ungodly expensive. And we thought, well, that's just Milan, that's just Italy. Well, it turns out we were there during Fashion Week.
Yes.
But we didn't know it. Okay, we're going to Milan to stay in this ridiculously nice...
It's like a different Sturgis experience.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Remember that.
We didn't plan it. So we get to Milan after riding in a Mercedes limousine up from, where'd we come from, Modena or Maranello?
One of those.
We were at the Ferrari factory. And then we go up to Milan, and then in southern Italy, we were tall, and Julie and I are not tall.
We were at least normal.
Yeah, we were at least normal. And then we go up to Milan, and we're walking around freaking people that look like they're from
Something
Avatar.
from the Avatar,
They're like
definitely.
9 feet tall, and they're so freaking gorgeous. Oh my
Yeah,
God, we
incredible.
looked like buttholes walking
looked
around
like
that
hobbits.
place. We did. We looked like hobbits.
You're like, what is going on here? Is this a Milanese thing?
Yeah,
Milanese?
but it was. Well, we didn't know.
But it was Fashion Week,
it was
because
Fashion
we eventually
Week.
wandered into that.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, okay, I felt a little bit better then.
Yeah, but that was so funny. So
But
we're
that's also an incredible experience.
It
To
was.
just see all of that happening.
Right. So to be in Milan during Fashion Week and, to walk around, it's not, oh, Tim, Julie, expensive clothes and all that. Look, you do or you don't care about that stuff. That wasn't the point. The point was to be around
experience.
such a bizarre experience.
And that
we
was
would,
by mistake, too.
by mistake.
Yeah.
Right. There was a time when you and I were in, we watched the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade from the top of the...
Not the World Trade Center, the Empire State Building.
Yeah. We didn't know
Because we couldn't get through the crowd.
Right.
So we found that and went to the top. That was pretty amazing, too.
Yeah,
That was very cool.
Okay, here's another funny story. We're in Paris,
Oh, yeah.
and there's a Bon Temps. Is that what it's-
Printemps.
Printemps, right.
Which
So
is a
there's
famous department store with really beautiful things inside.
so we're in Paris, and we're walking around, and we run into English, they're I think Canadians actually, and they asked us where we're from. We said Ohio, and they go, "Oh, you're from Ohio. We got something to show you." Do you remember this?
Yeah, I do.
And they took us around the corner in this massive department store, this multi-layered department store that was just elegant as you can possibly imagine. And they took us around the corner, and in the window, facing the public. Remember, this is France. There was all this S&M bondage stuff, and there were all these just crazy perverse sex things, and they thought it was hilarious because I guess we turned beet red because we were from
Well,
Ohio.
I've never
and
seen anything like
we
that on
hadn't.
a display. That'd be like walking past Macy's and seeing that.
I know, but it was so funny how different that was and having that exposure.
But you remember where we ended up that evening?
Don't jump on my story.
All right.
So
just making sure you.
I know. So this department store is multi-layer. So I don't remember if it was this trip or another trip. So we walk in and they're having a lingerie fashion show.
Yeah.
And there's this escalator, obviously. These escalators go up and down. And everyone's standing around. We had no idea. Everyone's speaking French. We speak a little bit of French and not hardly any. But we picked up that there was
French.
something that was going to be focused on the escalators. And so Julie went off to look at something. I started looking at the escalators. And then this music started. And then all of a sudden, basically, I don't even call them clothed. They're barely clothed. There was this freaking lingerie show of lingerie that Victoria's Secret would never have sold.
Not even close.
And there's all these old ladies and all these just people from the downtown Paris. They were just watching.
It was a thing.
It was a thing. They were watching all these models.
But I remember, side story to this, I remember thinking, you know what? I can park Tim here for at least an hour.
And you did.
And I did, and I went over to the Chanel counter inside that
Yeah,
place
I
because
remember.
my thought was, and I guess we were probably 30-ish or so.
I had a good time.
But I thought, you know what? I have never been like somebody who naturally does a lot with my makeup. I always was a little insecure about that. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to the Chanel counter in Paris, and I'm going to have them do it for me so that I will never second guess what my choices are
you
again.
talk about this in the book, don't you?
I do talk about this in
Yeah.
Harris Rules because, that was one of my mom didn't wear that much makeup. I never went to like a makeup tutorial. I would say Coach Rochelle's had some influence on me on some of these things. But I thought, I can park Tim at this lingerie show, wander off, get my Chanel thing sorted out. And to this day, I'm brand loyal to Chanel. And then, after the show was over and I had my makeup thing done, then we go up the escalator.
Okay, so I think it was 5 stories tall, right?
Yeah, I think that's about right.
And it was almost like a Willy Wonka thing, where every level was just a different new experience.
Razzle dazzle.
It's not like freaking going to a department store in Columbus, Ohio. Let me tell you.
Not even in New York City. It was beyond that.
No, it was beautiful. Oh my God, we could talk
just
about
stunning.
the chocolate store that we discovered on accident in Paris.
We'll save that for the next one.
Oh, that was amazing.
I still get their emails.
A multi-layer level candy store that
It was like a candy museum.
It was Willy Wonka.
Fashion, Fauchon.
Yeah,
I'm probably saying it wrong.
It's
but
Willy Wonka had he actually,
on some kind of acid, I guess. I don't know. It's
all right, so we keep on going to the different. We heard that there's a little cafe on the top of this, department store, and Julie and I have always been coffee fans, so we're thinking cafe. This sounds like a good idea, even though it was getting to be dusk, and so we go up one layer, level, and all of a sudden we walk out on top of this big rooftop terrace, and we see way in the distance we see the Eiffel Tower, and I don't remember what I said, or I don't remember. There were some words said to the effect that there's the Eiffel Tower. We wonder if it has lights on it or something. And maybe there was another couple that was up there that were, off at their table. And then the second you and I had that exchange, off in the distance, because we honestly didn't know. This is how dumb we were. But the Eiffel Tower then lit up. And if you guys not seen the pictures of the Eiffel Tower at night lit up, so beautiful. Stunning. And so we were just standing there like, holy shit, what are we seeing? And the Eiffel Tower, after seeing all the things
glittering.
Glittering. Like it did look like the most beautiful Christmas tree you've ever seen. And this was off in the distance, and and we just stood there and stared at it, right?
Like the most perfect unintended timing.
Yeah, after the S&M Street View show, after the porn show, the lingerie show, after all this, and then you go to the top of this sort of bizarre, department store, and you get to the top, and there you have this unbelievably beautiful thing off in the horizon. Well, I'll tell you something else. You want to stay on this trip?
Sure.
All right. This is the same trip to Paris or a different one?
I don't know. I think we've only been to Paris once, so it's the same trip.
All right. So Julie and I, when we're in cities, we walk. We don't take cabs or whatnot.
And we don't plan the crap out of it either.
No, we don't.
We might have one significant thing that we want to do a day.
Yep.
But it's not like you're going to do A, B, and C or else.
So Julie's, as I mentioned, family comes from if you want to Google it, Sasha Guitry, Guitry. So we knew he was famous when we run into somebody to this day that is from, Parisian or let alone from France, and we mentioned that Julie's maiden name is Guitry. We've had experiences on international travel and just different places where people have asked for her autograph, and because it's a great, I don't even know what.
It usually starts just by them looking at my driver's license,
or her
somebody's
passport.
checking me in or whatever.
Yeah. We keep her maiden name on her passport so that we can actually use that to our advantage when we go to Paris, because then we can get free drinks.
Yes.
We've had that happen. Yeah. So anyway, we're looking for this graveyard. Do you remember the name of it? Advanced trivia question.
I can't pronounce French to save my life, but it's in Montmartre, Montmartre, which is a neighborhood in France. It's a very, very, very old neighborhood in Paris.
Yeah, and you walk down this beautiful long...
It's where Amélie, the movie Amélie, was filmed.
Yep, you walk down this beautiful long staircase, and you get to this this graveyard. And the graveyard's not like a Midwestern graveyard. The graveyard's like... it is massive. It goes back, obviously, to the dawn.
They have the fancy crypts and the fancy gravestones and the arches and the just like. It was historic looking. It's been in tons of movies. Yeah, tons of movies.
The graveyard has.
Yeah.
They probably don't even call it graveyard there, do they? They probably call it something else, something fancier.
Something in French, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we're looking for her relatives' graves, and remember I told you guys they were really famous, and. Again, we speak a little bit of French, and the people there were historians that ran the graveyard. Basically,
they had like a map of
all the
people.
famous area, and they were. So we walked in there, and we said we were looking for Sasha Guitry's grave, and they said something else like we don't know what the hell they said, but they kept on telling us, like they kept on pointing,
like it's right over there.
Yeah, and it couldn't have been right over there, because right over there was like thousands of graves, and we're going like, what the hell are you talking about?
A little.
So it turns out his. I don't even know what it was. It wasn't even a grave. It wasn't. What was it?
His monument.
Yeah, where he was buried was
there.
It was right there. It
had roses on it.
But how do I describe this? You walk past what basically was this massive monument, archway, with this huge grave, with this huge everything. We thought that was the entrance to the graveyard.
No.
It wasn't. That was his grave.
Yeah.
So he was...
It wasn't just like a little tiny headstone or something.
No, it was really like a building, honestly.
I know, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
It was like a freaking building. It was amazing.
And just
my Aunt Carol's been there, too. It's very cool. Very really gives you pause.
Right.
Like, to your point, I mean, you are successful partially because you were here and people came before. So, like, don't fight it. It's like you're back to our podcast. You have an obligation to have your shit together and be wealthy.
Yeah, you do.
Not just to yourself, but to your future offspring.
I'm going to tell a car story.
All right, then we've got to. I have to. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to tell a car story. All right.
Ahead.
So I remember when I was a little kid and we were living at 223 East Selby, a little 1,300 square foot house, and there's 5 of us that lived there. I remember there was 60 Minutes that was on.
And I remember I was watching
Yeah.
60 Minutes with my dad, and there was a episode where I think it was Morley Safer
I think that's right.
was visiting Lamborghini in Italy. And I've always loved cars. I got it from my dad. I just read Road and Track, car magazines. I love cars. I love cars because they're kinetic art. Not all cars. Some cars are horrible. But
Yeah.
the fact is that when you're looking at something really beautiful, you're looking at functional art. That is, and it resonates with me. I love every aspect of something really, if I were looking at a beautiful piece of furniture, I appreciate it, but I don't quite understand how it was made. I do understand how cars are made, and I do because Julie and I've been to tons of places where they make amazing cars. Okay, now I remember watching that 60 Minutes, and I remember watching what's his name?
Morley Safer.
And the Lamborghini guy.
Balboni. I'll think of it in a second.
You can Google it real quick.
Yeah.
Lamborghini
You mean
test
the
driver.
test driver, yeah.
So I remember watching that, and I remember watching him take him on a drive in a Countach, and basically the 60 Minutes guy was visibly scared out of his noggin. And I remember watching this with my dad about this Lamborghini test driver taking this 60 Minutes guy down this beautiful, country road in, Modena.
Balboni?
What's his first name?
Valentino, I
Valentino Balboni, yeah. And Valentino Balboni, who is the test driver, is taking him on this drive, and is this guy with, is probably in his 30s. And I remember getting so emotionally unhinged watching this as a kid. I was so excited that it made my dad mad. My dad very, very stoic and did not have real highs or lows in his emotions. Did not, it's kind of like your 1950s dad type of thing. And he got mad at me because I was getting so emotional watching this. He probably was in his own way appreciating it, but he did not have the same attachment to what we were seeing. And I just was beside myself with how I can remember it to this day. You guys can probably hear it in my voice. Mm-hmm. So I'd always wanted, Italian cars, just sports cars, Porsches, whatever it was. And that was one of the things that drove me when we were so less than poor.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted to have a Ferrari by the time I was 30. And
Which
I
you did.
Yeah, I did. That was one of the goals that drove me when I was in my 20s for us to do what we did. I wanted to have a Ferrari by the time I was 30, and I did. And then I wanted to have other experiences after that, because then I realized I could do it, and I realized what it took to get it was not at all as hard as what people make it out to be. Mm-hmm. And we had a house at the time. We had lived over in, where we lived, and it was really nice. But we accomplished it. We could have just leveled off right there, but we didn't. But and then Julie and I eventually started to. We had a little car collection. We expanded into Lamborghinis, and I remember being at a Lamborghini thing in Monterey for Car Week.
Yeah.
Is that where we first met Balboni?
I think so.
Or
yes.
did we
I
meet
know it
him-
was at a car show. Then we met him in Italy. He also
And he
almost
remembers
ran
us
me
every
off the
time
track in
Yeah.
that Lambo event in California.
Yeah, California Motor
We've run
Speedway.
into him like freaking all the time.
We raced Lamborghinis at California Motor Speedway.
Well, you raced. I kind of piddled around.
Yeah,
but
Julie was the slowest one there.
I did it, though.
Yeah, and she practically, passed out. She was so nervous to do it, but she did it. And so we had this experience, and now we met this guy. To me, obviously he was a test driver, but we became friends with him, and he's such a sweetheart. And we just saw him in March
Very
and remembered
classy.
us, and just really nice. But every time I see him, I remember back to that moment when I was a kid, where I was having that little experience with my dad. So when I see him, he probably just says, "Oh God, here comes these people that are going to
They're there again."
When I talk about 60 Minutes again." But every time I see him,
Yeah.
I feel that little spark, and just hearing it and thinking about it now, it motivates me.
Yeah.
And I wonder, had I allowed at that point my dad's behavior of trying to admonish my excitement over something,
Or at least tamp you down on
right?
it.
But he didn't.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying he didn't try, because he did.
No, but you were somehow immune to it.
I was,
Yeah.
and I still am. So
Yeah.
the reality of it is, and God rest his soul in
Yes.
heaven, right?
Yes.
I'm not disrespecting, just stating a fact that. So whatever headwinds you guys had in your sort of parental support structure with regards to you thinking big, right there with you.
Yep.
But I think back to that type of thing, and I think that combined with other things that only come on the other side of experience.
Yes.
Those are the biggest, most monumental things that have happened in our lives, outside of obviously other things, that have shaped us.
Yeah.
Because we were willing to allow ourselves the discomfort of exposure.
I agree with that. And, I've had coaching clients that are really freaked out by flying, for example. And I'm not a big fan of flying, probably because I don't get to control the plane. I have some kind of issue with that. But what I always say to them is, look, I overcome that because my desire to have other experiences and to see things and do things is stronger than my fear of flying. So whatever you're fearful of, your goals had better be bigger than that, or you're never going to do anything.
Yeah, but I wonder, Julie, if you know
what I mean?
your mom doesn't like to travel. Your mom, if you were back in,
No, but she'll get on a plane if she,
Right.
she'll talk herself into it.
But if we were
yeah,
if we were back in that same environment,
Yeah.
your fear of flying,
it could have manifested into some
It
real
would
fear.
have.
We've had coaching clients that it's just too strong, and we work on that.
and everyone around them
Yeah.
started saying, "Oh, listen, you don't need to fly. Everything you need to do in
Right.
this world, you can drive up
Well,
to
it's
Lake
confirmation
Erie."
bias, right?
Right.
You'll look for something to reinforce what freaks you out. I mean, the whole political environment is totally like that.
Well,
You
but
can
that-
choose anything. But my point is that your goals have better be stronger than your fears, your
That's right.
desire for experiences, because those experiences lead to things that you haven't even had that thought. I didn't specifically have the thought, I want to go to Milan for Fashion Week, but because we had the guts to go to Italy and to walk around and have new experiences, we got to see Fashion Week in Milan.
And now you want to go back.
Right, exactly. But it didn't happen like seeing the Eiffel Tower light up from the top of Printemps. That wasn't a specific goal, but it happened because we wanted to go to Paris.
Well, here, I know you
what I'm
want to
saying?
take a break, but here's another thought for you, okay?
Yeah.
When we grew up in Columbus, Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
and again, not picking on Columbus, that's our common thread, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was abnormal for people to think and act like we do.
I would say generally that's true, yeah.
Okay, so furthermore, it was abnormal for people not to be having kids at a younger age than we had.
Yes, that's definitely
So
true.
it's abnormal for people not to be satisfied with having essentially a version of what their parents have.
Yes.
Okay, so when we went to Europe, let alone, frankly, New York
Yeah.
and L.A. and all that, it is
it's
normal
different.
to
Yeah.
see people that are older that have children.
Yes.
Whereas-
well, even here,
I know, it's true. Well,
especially here.
in Italy, it
Yeah.
was very normal.
Yeah,
for
that's true.
So that again, that type of
Well, it's
exposure.
cultural exposure, and at some point, some of these experiences might make you feel like not the freak, because maybe you're the only one that that's motivated.
Yep.
And maybe you think that makes something wrong with you, but then you go and you travel and you see, wow, that's pretty incredible that person was able to do that. Or you go watch somebody land on the International Space Center, like those astronauts, cool as cucumbers. You can do that, okay? That's thinking differently, and that's okay.
You want to take a break?
I'm good, yeah.
Okay. You said what you got. Had to come
Yeah,
to
I
say.
actually need a little bit of allergy medicine, but
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
All right.
but
Well,
I
we
think
can round the
that,
bend.
but to put a quasi period at the end of the sentence, not that we ever really do, because we're going to be podcasting tomorrow. I think that if they get what I would like our listeners to get out of this, other than just being entertained with our crazy stories, is a reset to your goals and to decide what do you want out of the rest of the year. Because if you don't, you're just going to be handed what you're going to get out of the rest of the year. You're just going to take whatever is on the news today, and you're going to ruminate on that versus saying, you know what, I'm in control of the rest of the year. Maybe I can't control everything, but I can control some things, like the goals in 5 areas of life I can find in the treasure map. Now's the time to have that hard reset and do something about it.
Text the word survival to 31996. You guys can also buy our book, which is on Amazon.
Yep.
Harris Rules. The book is coming out in audio form, though I don't know how soon. Our publisher is in control of that. And we have, did I tell you we have an audiobook publisher that's different than our book publisher? Did you know that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which just kind of
how does that
convolutes the
even,
whole
doesn't
thing.
even make
but
sense.
It's all right.
I mean, whatever.
We'll get it done.
We don't have to read it.
That's the important thing.
Yeah. So the moral of the story, guys, is we are doing our best to be to give you guys a path forward. We probably came from less than what most of you have come from, and we probably had higher mountains to climb than at least most of you. And we're going to keep on ascending. And I'll leave today's show with this. You don't have to have ups and downs in your life for your health, for your finances, for your relationships. You can have every year being better than the previous year. The mindset or the thought that you have a good year than a bad year, or a good run than a bad run, is voluntary. And the bad run happens when you are complacent. The bad run happens when you have chosen not to constantly be moving forward. And if you've got to spark some sort of emotional response, like watching 60 Minutes when you're a kid and seeing a Lamborghini, blast down a country road in Italy, if that's what it's going to take, or if it's going to take essentially listening to a beautiful piece of music, really force yourself to be okay being uncomfortable, because on the other side of the discomfort is where the real growth needs to be, and that's an amazing gift if you allow yourself to have it. I strongly encourage all of you guys to don't give up on life. Don't give up on yourself, not even a little bit. Look, if you're fat, get unfat. If you're broke, get unbroke. There's so many examples. Like when Julie and I were talking, we're telling all of our stories. This was pre-internet. Now you guys have you're so easily exposed to things because of the internet. Back when Julie and I were kids, the idea of going to Europe, from where we're from, would seem like some far out exotic thing that people only did when, whatever. But now it's a normal thing for, people to travel and not even think twice about it. Right. Now, maybe it isn't for you. That's your lack of exposure. And so what I strongly encourage all of you guys to do is realize that you are, even though this is, without a doubt, one of the most challenging times on a macro level for our economy and for a lot of people, you don't have to suffer because we're in a recession or a depression. You don't have to actually... You can choose not to participate.
You make your own economy.
That's it. At the end of the day, we did it. Hey, when we were coming up, we never sold real estate in a boom market. We never have done anything in a boom market. And matter of fact, I would say it's easier to help people and make money when things are tough and tight, because those who are willing to truly learn the skills necessary to make the most of a down market are the ones that do the best. And that's what this time is about. So guys, do text the word survival to 31996. In the meantime, hey, sweetie, I love you.
I love you too. Good show.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.